Okay, hello everyone. My name is Pablo Crivello. I've been with you since the last training. We are going to start by reviewing a couple of pending things that were left on the ink pad or that were left to review, such as the drive configuration and what happens when any of the drives fail. And then we're going to start digging deep into Prime Playout and Prime Editor. So we have a couple of things. We seen that we have now an input. So now we have a camera feed being connected directly into the chat output one, but we can also preview, or we can also set it to, instead of being every time that we use it to be fed into the environment, we could use it either as a scene object instead of a downstream gear. Also, we're going to review that, but before we start to review the cameras and Prime itself, let's dig through some of the issues that could happen whenever we use the box or whenever we move it around or have issues with the drives, because mostly when we move the SSDs or when we move the whole environment from one place to another, we would require to ensure that the drives are in an okay state. I'll give you a brief. We have two types of RAID inside of the Prime box, and we have a ghost partition. Inside of the Prime box, you have the vertical slots and the horizontal slots. This is more for an engineer standpoint to understand. We have the vertical slots that contains on storage 0 and 1. So the first two labels, you have both of the C drives running on RAID 0. And then you have the third bay that has the ghost partition or ghost drive. That should be your backup. If in any case what you want to do is you want to have a second operating system running on another drive, standalone drive, for example, if the C drive gets corrupted or if the RAID gets destroyed or if the drive gets degraded and you need to rearm it or you need us to give you a hand on rearming it, we recommend, and this is for your environment, Chiron does not take care of it, but it's a recommendation that we can provide. You can add another disk on base 0 with a different operating system. So you can boot into that system to rearm the C drive if it gets degraded or if you need to swap the drives. Now for the horizontal base, we have three types of, we have the second type of RAID, which is a RAID 5. That RAID 5 takes care of managing the three terabytes SSDs that you have. And if any of those gets degraded or gets into a bad state, the only thing that you need to do is you need to either reach back to us so we can provide you with a new drive. And once we analyze which is the drive that has complications, we can replace it with a new drive since it's the same type of drive. We are not going to send you, for example, if you have super micro, we're not going to send you any other kind of drive to ensure the rebuild of the drive without any issues. What we are going to send you is the same type of drive that you have there on your Prime, so you can just swap it over and have the rebuild process interact automatically with the machine. The only thing that you need to take into consideration is whenever you have a bad drive on the iDrive, which is the one that has the RAID 5, to reach back to us. And the idea is to understand when this issue starts happening. So right now we have three ways of reviewing our drives. We have mega RAID storage, we have launch LSA, and we have Micron storage executive. These three takes care mostly on the same scale. You're able to review, repair, rearm, and also interact with the RAIDs. There are the Micron storage executive is the one that takes care of the heavier load, which is the iDrive, and the Mega RAID storage for Intel takes care of the C drive as well as the health of the overall RAIDs. This is more of a review software. Micron storage takes care of the Avago rebuild API that you can see the logic parts and you can see the rest of the drive's health as well as the processes. And the LSA takes care of the route code board that connects to both of the rates and also gives you a brief information on both of them and a log that provides you with information about if the drive connected successfully, if the drive had any issues booting, the boot time, if you had errors in any kind of sector, if the drive was rearmed. For any of these three programs, if they ever ask you for credentials, should be the same that you have for your user. So in this case, it's ChyronHego, which are the ones that are, which is the same type of credential that you use to log in. So this should be the funny Chiron one. So instead of ChyronHego, it should be the ChyronHego, should be this credential. So the same ones that we use to log in. As you can see, we have one drive group, one virtual drive, and 3 physical drives. So it's taking care of reviewing the Avago Mega Write SAS controller. And we have the 3 drives here already configured. As you can see, we have the capacity, those are 3.3 terabytes. You always lose a little bit because of the compression that the drive uses, as well as for the extra space that it uses to work with all the rest of the data. You always lose a little bit of capacity. But the idea is that RAID 5, what it will do is it will combine this an understatement. I know that you already know what RAID 1, 5, 3, RAID 1, 0, 5, and 6 stands for, but just as an understatement, RAID 5, what it will do is it will give you redundancy over one drive by utilizing all 3 drives and having the information spread across them equivalently. So the idea is that if you have 3 drives, you're going to lose one of them for redundancy. But that allows you to just swap the disk that has issues with a new disk, and the drive should rebuild itself throughout the LSA controller. The launch LSA, it will rebuild the drive altogether without you even needing to touch anything. The only thing that you need is a little bit of patience, around 1 to 2 hours to rebuild the whole 6 terabyte drive. And then we have another hardware. We have the backplane, the type of enclosure that we use for the connection of the media drives. And Micron didn't start up. That's weird. Micron should start up. Then we have the Avago, Mega RAID, same credentials, ChyronHego, Funny Chiron. We call it Funny Chiron since we have plenty of. I already sent you over the other credentials, but Funny Chiron is the one that has most of the changes on the user and password. Oh yeah, there you go, Mega RAID storage. ChyronHego. There you go. So Mega RAID Storage Manager will let you know a little bit more on how to rebuild the corresponding drive. We prefer to use it whenever we have issues on the RAIDs because we can see the more clearly the physical and logical state. Usually when any of the drives are with issues, they will present an icon in front of them, a warning icon in front of them. So that's where we would grab the corresponding serial number and use that serial number to send you over a new drive. This is all troubleshooting that I think it's worth mentioning because some of the times what you end up having is, for example, you open Prime and it asks you to create a new project and it points you towards the C drive. So that's the first thing that you will notice whenever you have an issues with the I drive. The other thing that you would notice is that if you go into your documents folder, this PC, you will not see the media drive altogether because in whichever case that the RAID gets degraded or has issues, the first thing that it will pop up is on the Mega RAID Storage Manager that you would need to add because you're not seeing the RAID. What it will pop is that it has an issue on a bad sector of one specific drive, and it will ask you if you want to ignore it or rebuild it or fix it. Whenever you go through that process, usually we recommend to fix it or rebuild. The drive will be turned on again. You will get your media drive once again, but that action will trigger the Mega Drain review. So it will show you here, or it will show you on the Avago. Where is it? Did I close it out? I close it out. Or on the Avago, which is here. My bad. ChyronHego. ChyronHego. So it will show you here that you have an issue on the sector, or if you want to fix it on the Mega Raid. And whenever you fix it, it will prompt you with an information, the corresponding warning on the corresponding drive that has issues. So after that, you will be able to launch your iDrive, but what we recommend is to wait for us to send you over a new drive so we can replace it, since it's not that you're not going to have any kind of issues. You might lose the iDrive once again after you reboot the unit, and that's why if you are designing or doing a heavy design workload, we prefer to wait for the drive. But if there is no other case, you can keep working on it. Just keep in mind that it could pop up the same issue during every time you reboot the unit. You might face also a little bit of staggerness or slowliness while using assets from the iDrive because one of the drives is not working properly. But that's part of the issues that comes with drives whenever they are in a bad state. Okay, with that out of the way, let's start with Prime. I know we had a long time, two trainings with this, so now we can start with Prime. So we have our Prime here with a training package with a corresponding project list, and we are able to start reviewing it from either a playout perspective if you're going to be operators, or from a editor perspective if you're going to be designers. Right now, the course is going to take a big leap into the designing part instead of the playout, because the idea is to review Prime 101, 102, and 103. That takes care of mostly designing functions. If you want to know a little bit of operator, let me know and I can add it into the training. So we have our software right now running. We are able to push graphics on top by using the preview and program. That's one of the things that we already review. We are able to add or to modify our feed or our outputs by going to the configuration. What we're going to do before jumping into the editor is just review a couple of configuration here, as well as the settings that we could use for the environment. So player configuration allows us to, let's dig right into it. So the player configuration allows us to modify all the values that we are going to use on Prime that are going to be used for outputting signal or manipulating data that is being fed into the Prime unit. Even if you do minor changes on this part, you need to reboot the Prime software or restart the Prime software. If you do any changes on the matrix that you need to push a new firmware update, you would need to reboot the unit to apply those changes on the firmware. So either way, you need to take into consideration, if you're running with a tight schedule, and you need at least 5 to 10 minutes to either reboot the Prime or just reboot the software. That takes a couple of like a minute or so. So it's not something that you can avoid, and it's something that will not get applied until you do that reboot or restart of the software. So on the output, we have all the kinds of output that we could add. We can either click on add output. That will add us a new matrix output because it's based on the first available option that we have. If we were using, instead of an SDI output, if we were using NDI or GPU, what it will do is it would add the first option it had available. If this was a designer, what it will do is it will add a desktop, an application window output. It will forbid, it will bypass the AWS CDI output because it's not the most common one. That's the only thing that differs from these kind of outputs. So the idea is that we have 16 render channels, and for our licensing, if you are on a 8 spigot connection, and you might ask, what is a render channel? The render channel are all these mini windows that you see that you can send information on top of it. And these are the windows that are going to be used either as a preview, either as a camera feed, either as a output feed. So on the license, you might be able to just load 8 spigots with fill and key. But in theory, what Prime is capable of, or what it's being sold as, is an 8 channel with 8 previews on top of that. That's the most heavy workload that it can handle. So 8 mini windows with 8 previews before it, and that's why when you say let's add a video key and fill, you might have extra room to work because key and fill takes care of only one mini window. So you can add more if you want to have, for example, if you want to have no input, but if you want to have, for example, an application window and use this application window for any other process, for example, an atlas. We're going to go through atlas in a moment. It's very simple. But the idea is that you could add more to your environment without even using the matrix SDI. Okay. There is also, if you plan on using the designer box to send information over, there's also a remote engine that it will allow you to send over information from the designer over to this box. The only thing that you need to connect is the address of that box and the port. And on the other side, you could add an input. It's the other way around. So you would send information through the remote engine, and your input would be a camera feed that needs to be, instead of matrix SDI, it needs to be remote engine. So you would add the address that you are inputting the signal in. So this would be the signal of the prime that you're reaching out and the port that you're using. That way you could use your designer as kind of an output box on a different engine. We prefer, instead of remote engine, to use the application window, or to use another kind of output if you're receiving the signal, and use it as a camera feed in some occasions. After we go through the adds on the objects that you can add on here, we can add also subchannels. And there's a little difference between window output and desktop window output. We sadly do not have full borderless window output. That's referred to GPU output. And those are licensed for video walls. The idea is that you could add an extra display port to the back of your video wall, to the back of your Prime video wall, and you could use that output as a full screen resolution 4K. Then we have application windows and desktop windows, which is application windows stands for a mini window inside of Prime, and desktop window stands for a window that will pop up whenever you run Prime as a standalone engine, and you can fill it with graphics. Same case for GPU output, but with a border, and you can move it over to your required place. Lastly, we can add a sub-channel output, which uses a main channel parent. For example, it uses the output 1, and then you can modify, for example, if you want to modify this to 300, but instead of 1080, let's go for PAL 4.3. So what you could do is you can create a mini window here that you can send selective graphics on top of it. So if you want to send only bugs, You can set it up either as a custom, or if you want to send, maybe you want to send just highlights or photographs or headshots of people, you could send them up on a sub channel. The idea is that it will take over all the properties from the parent channel. That's why you don't have any kind of audio source or genlock or anything, because it will take over it will use the parent properties to provide to forward all of that information. So you shouldn't have to modify any of those properties. Lastly, we have the remote engine and auxiliary output, as well as render output. Auxiliary output is just a channel for audio that you can set up. It's very self-explanatory. We can dig deeper if you want, but it's very self-explanatory. You have the parent output that what you're going to do is you're going to grab that output, and then you're going to select where do you want to output it out. Since the audio mode here is disabled, let's use embedded. So here we'll let you know which kind of output is it using for the embedded SDI, and then you can rebind it to a different audio output. The idea here is that if you needed to send it over through multiple audio feeds, you can send it over through that. And then we have the remote engine that we just spoke a couple of minutes ago, and the rendered output. Prime render is the one that connects to the Cameo. So in this case, and on most of the cases, it's not going to be licensed for any box, only if you're running render. And if you're running render, you're not going to be using any of the other outputs. Usually the render comes already pre-armed, so you shouldn't need to meddle with it. The idea is that the render is a connection with a Cameo that lets you generate previews of the scenes that you have here, but from a web API. It's a very important function of Cameo. It's the main function of Cameo, but since we are not on a Cameo environment, I'm not going to dig deeper because I cannot connect to it. Then we have clip players and recorders. If we had any license for that, those would be available. The idea is that we could use either a camera feed, or we could use an output channel to feed that clip player, and we can record from that, as well as we can use the power recording tools from it. So clip player is for playing mostly clip files, and recorders are usually self-explanatory for getting the channel, the camera feeds or the output feeds recorded. Then we have playlists. Playlists are a way for you to automate your environment if you do not have any kind of automation, or if you are a manual operator. So playlist allows you, and I'm going to show you in a moment, playlist allows you to load all your scenes and all your messages in an ordered way, and you can use it either as a take list or as a queue list. The idea is that you decide whenever they go on air, and you decide whenever you take them out. You can set timers, you can set different output channels to output your scenes or messages. It's a very neat function, and you can add as many playlists as you need, and you can modify the names. So if you have multiple operators, you can change that on here. Then we have the Atlas. The Atlas is a multi-view. That's why I was saying, hey, you could use an internal engine channel here to use Atlas. Atlas allows you to review all of the channels that you need. So just a quick example, if we add an output here, and we use, for example, the application window. I always misclick. So if we go to Atlas, we enable it, and we select output 2. And here we can add as many channels as we have connections. So we can repeat the channels if we need to, or remove them if we don't need to. And the idea is that we have our preview here of how they would look like. We can order them out in the best case that we need to, and we can modify the grid, as well as we can modify the size of them. So you can have a very, very customizable multi-view. The only thing is that it takes one of the render channels, and if you send any kind of information on top of that, it will override that information. That's why usually it shows up on here, but you're not able to click it. And the only way to see it through is by going into the view configuration and displaying that view with the control panel, because usually what it tends to do is it tends to show itself without with the proxy output, but without the control panel and without the audio meter. Proxy output, audio meter. So this is how it should look if you had a composition of multiple windows on the Atlas side, and you should not be able to select it from the top side on here on the output side, but you should be able to select it from here, from the layout panel. It's a very neat function. I don't see a lot of people using it, but it's a very neat function. Player configuration, yes. Then we have bypass. Bypass is an external tool that we have that allows you to have a camera feed connected to Prime. So a clean feed and a camera and your output. So if you run into any kind of issues that you need to disable Prime, or you need to switch it over, or you need to upgrade it, or whatever you require, the bypass panel, you connect the output of your Prime, an input, a camera feed, and all the equipment that could replace that feed with a clean feed. And the bypass panel, what it will do is it will shut down the output from the camera that you are sending it, and it will start sending clean feed from that side. We can provide that from the sales personnel. So if you need it, you can reach out either to sales or to your manager on Chyron side to commission one or to get one. Then we have external data. External data, as it name implies, is all the either Chyron or external sources connections that we will add to feed our Prime that is not commands. These are usually metadata, or these are usually custom set for specific Chyron commands. Lydia is for CBS. It's a if I'm not mistaken, it's an automation feed with RSS and commands, and I think it was set up specifically under a requirement from CBS, but I might be wrong. I haven't set it up yet, any kind of Lydia package. I know it's not the most common environment. TriCap is one of our solutions, which is a software that takes care of tracking and reviewing live camera. The name is live camera and live modifications on top of clips and on top of camera feeds from Paint, which is a telestration software. So it allows you to use the camera feed to modify its variables on top of it, add graphics, add how is it called? Add mobile modules, display on screen, use the green screen from the environment, use the environment as a green screen, so you can add either telestration objects on the grass or on the fields. It's a very use case scenario for most of the sports venues. UDP, if you have a third-party app that connects through UDP and you have a specific address for it. And CCM is for virtual augmented reality. It will get fed through the cameras, so it will get metadata from the cameras. And the idea is that you would be able to preview that information throughout CCM and throughout the scenes on the editor side, and later you can play them out through the scenes. We're just finishing up right now. Settings is for overriding parameter settings, such as application, project layout, and shortcuts. If you have anything in particular that you would like to review, that you would like to set up on here, you would be able to do that. If we want to set up a specific project to load the Prime, we can set that up. If you have, for example, an engineering project that you would like to set it up so it turns on and you have that engineering project, as soon as you turn on Prime to just test parameters, you could do that. Layout, if you have a preferred layout, this is the standard layout as I showed you before, but you can modify all the mini windows that you have on your layout, so you can dock them whenever you need to. If we need it, we can review that later. And then we have shortcuts, which is all the commands that every user uses. If you are an operator on Prime, you should be able to set up your own shortcuts and have a very um, uh, smooth environment. But the idea is that every operator uses their own shortcuts. Depends mainly on who uses it at first, so you can bypass that with the shortcuts environment, with the shortcuts override. And lastly, we have advanced, which is more for how to load information from third-party apps. So for example, if you're using a branding and you're receiving ticket information, you could, if you're using, for example, RSS or parsers, direct write, you could use that for ingesting information without without a lot of issues on the logic or the parser, to have issues on the play outside, because there are some commands or some parsing that takes care of a specific logic structure that in some cases Prime could have issues with, or GDI if you are using, for example, ROS overdrive, or if you're using a BTI, if I'm not mistaken. BTI uses GDI, which is a more simpler parser. Then we have our media cache, clip cache, video input, and these are very specific settings that we are not going to touch, but the idea is that we have our cache size already pre-set up. So the idea is that if we go until a total amount of cache, if we send over an amount that could potentially go over this cache size, what it will do is it will start to run a little bit slower, and it will give you a warning that the cache size is being overused. So it will ask you to remove the scenes, or it will remove the scene altogether. In the worst case scenario, it could shut down Prime. So if you're feeding it through with a lot of 4K videos, this is one of the media cache size that we might need to increase. Then we have our clip memory. I'm going to be completely honest, I haven't had any questions about clip memory. Enhanced performance playback. I think this is more regarded the video clip players and the capability of the sequence load on those, but I haven't been able to modify these parameters. Some of these parameters are added on the newer versions of Prime, which are not installed in all stations. So it might be only for clip player or clip recorders. Then we have video input is self-explanatory. How many frames would you like to hold after an input gets disconnected? LyricX connection, if you are running Lyric, the idea is that if you have installed LyricX, Prime will see that folder, and it will say, hey, I can use one of the Lyric channel outputs, so you can use LyricX and send over those graphics and use one of the outputs here. The issue with LyricX is that you can only connect to one channel on Lyric. And lastly, we have the DPI system, the display. The idea is that it will overscale to 100%, even though if you set it 150, 125, depends on your resolution. So you can set it up to scale with that or ignore the scaling. And graphic drivers, the idea is that this is a new feature, which is the one that allows you to install newer versions of Prime without needing you to install newer versions of NVIDIA without needing you to reinstall Prime. So what it does is it has the render engine working and it accommodates with every time that it starts with the new profile from NVIDIA. So with all of that done, with all of the player configurations done, we can click OK on apply OK or cancel. Depends on if you want to apply the matrix configurations or if you want to proceed with everything. So now it will ask me to restart the Prime. I will proceed. Let's see, what changes did I do? I think I didn't do any changes. Maybe Atlas is configured. Okay. If you have any issues or if you have any questions, let me know. Stop me and ask me whatever you need. If you want me to go a little bit faster and skip right ahead into the editor side, we can do that as well. View, yes, okay, config. Did I change anything on here? No, I should not. Okay, playlist, Atlas, bypass, external settings. Okay, nothing was modified. Great. So after that, we have our settings. I'm going to jump directly into the settings because the other objects are, well, we could go through automation and devices. But outside of player configuration, settings and automation are the most important options that we have. Setting is more for, how could I say this? It's more from a appearance standpoint and behavior of the Prime whenever it's already loaded. So this is, for example, in general, you can modify the theme, you can modify general accesses or general, how is it, the behaviors, such as, for example, if you're starting Prime, you have that configuration file that loads in. Whenever you start Prime, you can either prompt player configuration on and off. So now we just run Prime and Prime will take the first configuration that it has. If you want to modify if you want to start it minimize or start it or not start it minimize like we have here, very simple modifications. If you want to show, if you have a bypass, you can either show it or not show it. SDI input indicators, if you have inputs or if you don't have any kind of inputs. Those are most of the things that you are not using, you can disable it here. Same as playout, if you're using a keypad entry or if you prefer to use, so the track recall, here we have the track recall. If as soon as you use any kind of keypad entry, it will bind to that keypad or to this recall box. So it will void you to use your keypad numbers if you're on a playout environment. Messages behavior, if you want to include scenes with the corresponding message, if you want to have either a thumbnail on the scene or on the output, depends on how you create your scene altogether. The load behavior, this is more guided towards sports. Prime, and let me go into a little bit of why Prime is so interesting outside of LyricX, as well as why Prime is so interesting in the whole scheme of graphical generators. Prime has a layer system, which is very, if you know any kind of Adobe package, it's very similar to Adobe, where you have layers that you can create, that you can set information one on top of the other. Prime can handle from -1000 layers all the way to 1000 layers. So the idea is that if you want to use, for example, if you want to use a lower third, an OTS, a bug, everything on only one output, you can change the layering which they are going to be used, and then you can send them out without any kind of issues. So the idea is that on most of the stations, they use layer 1 through 100. So they have, for example, the 10 layers for lower thirds. From 11 to 20, they have OTS. Layer 50, they have full screens. Layer 70, they have bugs. So things that you need to have at all times. takes priority. So if you have the higher the layer, as well as the priority of the object that is going to show. But on some sports venues, that comes as an issue because they need to send out quick successions of messages one on top of the other that cancel each other, or they need to modify on the fly the messages. So that's why there are either single scene per layer. So multiple scenes is that complex behavior which you have 1 throughout 50, 1 throughout 1000. Single scene per layer is the one that allows you to have one scene that loads without any kind of base, because you could add bases. We are going to review that more throughoutly on how is it called, on 102 or 103. And then single scene only, which allows you to send one scene per object. So you send over one scene, you send over the next one, and the previous one gets removed. No layering, no, it's more straightforward behavior if you're planning on using it on sports venues, or if you're starting to play out with Prime from an operator standpoint. And from an editor standpoint, it's more simpler whenever you also have multiple outputs connected to the unit. Then we have the control panel, which is the behavior that the control panel has. The control panel was the little control panel that appears. For example, let me grab this one. Whenever you load a graphic, it could contain or not a control panel that allows you to modify information on the scene. You can modify that behavior. If you want to modify and this is important because it's also the same behavior that we will have whenever we go through a transition effects. So we have preview upgrade and program and update. Preview, every time you type anything that you type, it will show up on the preview. And the program, anytime that you lose focus or press enter, it will update that value. Then we have the cache, so it saves the cache for the clips if you want to modify clips, saves the cache for images. So it separates a little bit of extra, or a little bit of extra, I would say rendimiento, but it would be extra part of memory, so you can load up those either images or clips. Then we have the appearance, if you want to modify or change a little bit of the appearance of the prime. If you want to modify, for example, the active channel and active program preview, you can apply that. And now you have two borders on top of the prime that lets you know which is the current channel that is being outputted and where are you aiming at whenever you're loading a scene. If you have multiple windows, this is very helpful because it's a fast way of you analyzing what is going on which output. So you can select, maybe with your shortcut, you can go from F1 to F12. You can select your outputs from F1 to F12, and you can prepare your scenes to send them over on those specific outputs. I know that F1 to F12 could be used for other things, but this is just a quick example. Project folder is one of the things that we're not going to touch. This is where we have all of our common root projects, root settings, and Cameo folder. If we touch any of these, usually Prime gets a little bit funky or it doesn't work as expected, so it doesn't load things properly. This is the way that Prime has to order all of the media and all of the projects, so the idea is to not touch any of the folders here. If you want to review them, we can review them. But I think that we made a good effort on the first training regarding the project structure and the common folder. Startup scenes, if we have any scene that we want to load up on, maybe if we want to test the tellers, if we want to test if we have the corresponding SDIs, the corresponding key and field, we can set up an examples here that whenever we launch Prime, that scene will get launched with it. Clips is also the amount of clips that you can send over, the amount of clips that you can generate, the tags that you can create with the clips, if you have a specific name, or if you have a message ID or a group that you want to clip tag it. Or on the power clips, it allows you to have the first frame as well as to hold if you need to hold the last frame. We're going to jump very fast through these last ones. Quality control is just for a playlist perspective. The idea is that you will have different instances of that quality control. If it's being played, if it is in progress, or if it's not started, you can add more quality and define the names as well as define the use case scenario. Language, as I told you before, I would really recommend you to use English because that's the standard for Prime, but feel free to try any other language that you might find or that you might use. It's a little bit odd. The translations are not the best. Espanol is on lowercase as well as French. That's and Italian is also lowercase. There's some things to make changes, but Dutch and English are uppercase. Just quick reminder. Then we have all the login. I think that we went through login on the last training, if I'm not mistaken. The idea is that you're able to see all the changes that appears throughout Prime, and the workflow logger allows you to have a more precise review on these logs, or precise review on the actions that Prime takes. BFX are for external logging on the BFX files. And to be completely honest, I haven't seen anyone run BXF, not BFX, BXF. I haven't set it up as well, but I have seen some stations that have already set it up. There is currently no BXF container that I've been working with. So it would be a lie to say you that I can set it up or I know the expected behavior for it. What I can do is if you need it, I can provide you with more information on the next training. But since I haven't seen anybody run it at all, is something that, as far as I know, it's not currently in use for Prime, but I can get you information if you need it. Live Uploader, if you have Prime Live, which is a web-based environment hosted on Amazon, the idea is that you're able to load your scenes into the live uploader and play them out on the API. Cameo is for connecting the Prime to the Cameo, so you can push your information directly into Cameo. We're not going to dig deeper into these 4 ones. Hub drive is for matching the corresponding hub drive, which is our file sync solution for Cameo. And the idea is to have all the packages on sync with all the primes. And later we have scripting. If you know about scripting, if you are going to deploy any kind of scripts into the editor side, we need to first set up if you are able to have the license for that, because JavaScript, for example, if you plan on adding JavaScripts, or if you know how to use JavaScripts or integrate JavaScripts into the editor, that would require a license. But C# and VB should be available from the editor side, as well as if you want to run scripts directly into Prime as a startup process, you could also set that up. You can either enable them or disable them. And with that, we just have to review automation, and we can start with the edition side. Automation, as we reviewed the last time, is a very quick way for you to add external, disable and remove. It's a very quick way for you to add any kind of external sources for commands to play over Prime scenes. So if you want to add, for example, VTI, if you want to add ROS Overdrive, ROS Ignite, I think it is, and Grass Valley Overdrive. Oh, my bad. If you want to add XML connections, UDP connections, if you want to add streams through UDP, you can set them up on here. If it is to use VDCP to control or to use an external VDCP, I think it was for reading clips and triggering connection to those clips through through an external command. So the idea is that you have a quick set of commands that you could use. You can use play, stop, and pause. This is more guided towards clip players. And the thing is that you can select a COM port on the back of the unit and define what kind of commands you want to use. You can use multiple VDCPs for the same COM port. Then we have, well, PBus, Oxtel, or EAS for setting up if you want to use as well COM1 port for loading registers or loading rules on those and add them into the PBus for modifying scenes, triggering scenes, playing clips, same as PDCP behavior, but in a different or in a more specific, in a different command line. So those are different environments. Oxtel, if you are going to use TCP/IP for Oxtel connections. EAS, if you have the EAS boards for the audio EAS. Again, any kind of scene that you are prepped that you want to play out with the EAS, the connection type, and the Unicode. Oh, EAS is not for, my bad, it's not for audio EAS. This is for outputting through EAS commands. I got it confused with EAS audio with the device output. This is also another way for you to connect to a specific external connection, which is not intelligent interface, XML or UDP. And then we have AMP, which is it's a specific, I think AMP, I haven't set it up as well, but it should be a connection from, should be a specific connection from gateway defined that Prime has that allows you to play clips or scenes or graphics or a clip player. Uses the cache folder, and you can send commands through the gateway 1 to 12. And after you set up any kind of connection, what you could have is an edit. Depending on the kind of connection you have, it might be different. For Cameo, it is ISQ channel, which is our playlist environment. If it is an intelligent interface, it would be more guided towards the EAS. It would be more guided towards how you can modify the port, the connection. In fact, the edit on these ones are the same one that you see whenever you add it on the top bar. The only one that differs is the Cameo connection that you cannot delete because it's required for Prime to have the Cameo connection. It's already prepped. And the rules that you have, as well as on the intelligent interface or any other kind of automation connection, the rules on the Cameo are different, a little bit different, because you can execute specific macros from here to trigger with ISQ, which is with the ISQ panel. And with the intelligent interface, you have a set of rules. And as well with XML, UDP, WebSocket, you should have a different set of rules for each one of them, or you don't have rules because those are defined by the connection that you're receiving. They are more straightforward, they're more defined on the properties tab. But for intelligent interface, for example, you need to set up the corresponding rules that you're going to send through your controller. And it could be a Sony switcher, it could be a raw command line, it could be a third-party app, it could be whichever you can send command lines that contains the corresponding P command lines that Prime reads. Prime is very simple. If you send them a P clear or a P play, and you select and you define the specific connections that you have for it, it will be able to load them. So the only requirement is that you have an external port connection, that port whitelisted, and the rule defined. If you have all of those three, you are able to send over commands to the prime, and prime should be able to have those channels played out or have those commands being used. If you want, we can review that with raw commands inside of the same prime. Let's delete that. And later you have the enable or disable options. That's only for enable or disable the corresponding automation. So now that we have all of the information required to understand how prime configuration is set and how prime settings are bounded, we can start with the editor side. So we went through the prime as a project-based workflow, as the folder structure that it has on the first training, the common folder, some of the basic interface that we see here, the UI on here on the playout side. But now let's jump into the editor side. The editor side, if you ever...
Pablo,
Yes,
sorry.
sir.
I have just a question.
Yes.
I want to go back to the sound output.
Yes.
In this machine, we can only add the output from the embedded
Embedded
uh,
SDI.
signal, or we can have another source for input audio.
The input, yes, you can add a different source for system audio input. I need to define it here. Depends if you have the back panel connected either with a mic or with a line on the back of the motherboard, or if you have something specific that you want to add as a audio feed. Do you have any idea of if you want to connect any specific audio resource to the unit? What are you
Server
going to connect?
to our server for ChyronHego?
Yes.
No.
Okay. And on the output, do you need audio?
Okay.
Come again?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And for the audio output, one of the things that I didn't ask when I was commissioning the box is, are we using embedded AAS or any kind of specific system audio output? I would assume embedded, but we can always change that to AAS as well. And then we have our audio channels, right? Did I went through I didn't went through the composition of the corresponding output. So just a quick review on this, because I think I went through, but I might forgot. Every time you add any kind of output, you have specific properties for them. These properties are bounded to the type of connections that you're going to set. On this case, we have Matrox SDI, and we can select if you want video and key or video out only. The idea is that we can, if you have GPU, you have only video out because you're using one of the GPU channels. NDI is for video and key. Then we have AWS, network string, application with all of them should be video and key, except remote engine, render, and auxiliary audio, and sub channel, which this one is it uses a parent channel. And if that parent channel has video and key, we should be able to use that video and key as well. Then we have the connector. This is the only thing that we cannot modify on a VNC standpoint, but we can modify if we are on a GPU standpoint. We can select which GPU output we want to use. But in the case of Matrox, we are not able to select a specific VNC connector. If we were using the newer LA5 2110 connectors, we would be able to define the IP configuration on those, but that's for another type of prime, which are prime IPs or prime 2110s. We can define as well the naming conventions that we're going to use for our channels and the video standards that we have for them. If the idea is to use 8-bit or 10-bit, we can change that on here. Usually for Matrox, we use 8-bit SDR, not HDR, but depending if you want to use, I think that you need a license for the HDR now. Okay. And LUT is also defined. This is more for sport guided. If you receive a color parameter that it's usually based on LUT files, which is for the color calibration on the cameras that gets inputted. The idea is that we can use that on here. So we can import that file and modify the color parameters on the camera feed on the spot. We're going to jump for 8 to 8-bit because mostly we use 8-bit, but we can change that over to 10 if that's needed. The idea is that then we have our video shape. If it is video and key, it will have that shape or unshaped behavior. The idea is that shape, what it will do is it will grab your output and it will try to cut it as similar as the key on the spot whenever you're throwing a graphic on top. Since you are not using a key, it will not be able to be used. But the idea is that it uses a little bit of extra render to properly cut off on a real time the key for the field. DSK or downstream input, if you're going to use an input to be used as a camera feed all the time, so it's not even able to be removed. So you are sure that you're going to use that all the time. So you put graphic on top of that. Usually the structure for brandings and the structure for most of the stations that uses a video and input are with downstream input. I don't see a lot of stations with an input that is not being fed through downstream, but I can show you the use case scenario for both of the options. Audio mode, it uses either the SDI embedded output, AAS if you had an AAS port connected to the matrix board on top of it. System audio if you want to set up a specific audio, and virtual if you want to have a virtual channel. For example, if you go on virtual here, what it will do is it will create another virtual output for the audio embedded. And audio channels, it will allow you to go from 2 to 16. This is always on the matrix side. Then we have genlock sources. If we have genlock or not, we accept true burst and black burst without any kind of issues. So as soon as as long as you have a general genlock connection, we should be good to go. If we want to modify the timing, we can modify it from the up and down connectors, up and down selectors. Anti-aliasing, this is disabled because we're on 4K, but if we are on 1080, the anti-aliasing is the way that we can apply some sort of smoothing or some smooth view on the output. This concerns the output as well as concerns the output that goes through the router, because you can either modify behavior that are on the prime and behavior that are going to apply into the output for the SDI. So anti-aliasing takes care of some of the output that goes over the router. So on 4K, we usually don't set it up because it's a lot of power to handle, but on 1080 feeds, we set it on. Preview channel, if you want to have a preview channel designated, such as the one that we have here, it will grab all the information that it has from the main parent channel, and it will call it preview and the number of the preview that it has. The proxy output is the quality that you're going to have in this mini window. That's why you see yourself a little bit pixelated, but if you go for full res, as well as the proxy frame rate is the amount of frames that you have compared to the feed that you're going to send. If you have full, what you will see now is what you should be going out on your router. And play all toolbar, this is more guided towards clip players, so they can show you the clip playing activity or the controls that you have on there. Now that we have that, let's restart Prime and let's see how do you see yourself through the output, or how you should see yourself through the output on the Prime. Mm. I know that you had a long day before, so if you want to go through a 10-minute break, whenever you need it, just let me know. We can do that. Okay?
Hey,
So now this is how you should see yourself on the output. So if we remove the control panel, you see more yourself. You should see yourself in a more clearer way. The same camera feed that I'm receiving through the meeting is the one that you're sending on here. Control panel. And with that, we can start with the editor. Now, at last. So the editor side is a very similar behavior that if you
Pablo,
ever play, yes, sir.
now in our signal here, we saw that
Yes.
the quality it changed, but the colors in the PP program on the switcher it's still different.
Come again.
This is according to the ChyronHego, it's another issue because the image in the output it's almost red, not clear. Maybe you can't see that, but it's different. The colors.
The colors that you're seeing here, are the ones that you're receiving through the
And
output.
the output it's different. It's not the same.
I see them on the camera feed that you're sending me through the Google Meet. Those are a little bit opaque or a little bit
Black, it's
dimmer.
clear. Yeah, yeah.
Um, it could be because I set it up for 8-bit. We can set it up to 10-bit SDR. I think it could have a wider range of color. So let's set that up. Let's change that. But it could be that let's see. Let's see. Let's okay. It also depends on your monitor and the color of the monitor calibrated, but I would assume that that's something that you already took into consideration, right?
Oh, we have the both on the same screen and they are different.
Okay.
They are different output on the multi-view.
Yeah, I want to understand it. This is on the
There is a
ChyronHego.
converter here. I don't know if they are the same configuration because we never touched. There is Azure because we write with two output to SG in the two monitor different. But I don't know if the mixer have the same output or is the
You
same.
spoke about the monitor. I don't know. Here,
The idea is that the SDI signal that gets outputted is the one that you see here.
Let me try 1 second.
Change
Put the camera, I show you because
No.
I try, Hello?
Hmm.
I don't know if you can see.
I see the camera, but from my standpoint, I don't have a profile, a color profile to let you know. I know that they seems to be a little bit
Oh, so
washed away.
in the input, wait, I put focus.
Oh yeah, in the input they're a little bit. The input is the one that you have on the preview, right?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is different.
The output it's in the program.
Yeah, and it seems to be a little bit more highlighted on the output.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, but your output don't go directly into the mixer, but pass to the router.
It does goes through a converter, right? Because you were using a 12G.
No, router, no, router is transparent. If I give a signal HD, give me an HD.
It's the same normally.
Yeah, it's transparent, the router, normally.
Yeah.
But we can check to go directly. Wait.
As far as I understand, I haven't seen any prime with issues on the output or a different color pattern.
I
So it
tried
should be the same.
I try to go directly into the prime with the camera.
That's weird. I haven't seen it before. I haven't seen this pattern of this color pattern before.
Yeah. Pablo,
And we don't even have any kind of modifications to do on the input as a color panel if you are not using a LUT LUT set.
Pablo, you spoke about
sir.
features about quality control.
Yes.
This is according to the edit, or it's also regarding to the signal.
Quality control referring to, for example, as on the settings on the settings parameters.
Yeah.
The quality control here.
This one.
This is based on the playlist behavior and the playlist status that you have. If you open up a playlist here, you're able to, for example, grab over and send over clips.
Okay.
And depending if you're playing them out, you will see them on gray. Or if you want to play them out, you will see them on green or blue. And if you remove them, you will see them. Right now, it shouldn't be. Let me see if those are for back control. Let's add an unspecified. Mark it on in progress. Okay, we have 3. No, if we add more, we need to add more specific behaviors, unspecified, complete, or in progress. But these are referred to the playout behavior. Oh, this is more guided towards not take list, but queue list sequence. There you go. This should be. There you go. Now you have the green view, which it means that it's on current play, and the previous one, the gray one, which is prepped or should be prepped, and then you have the preview ones which are with no color, which refers to the already played out scenes. That's weird. Did it went black? Did the camera went black for a sec?
Yeah, was me.
Oh, well, okay. I thought it was an issue on one of the objects. But yeah, it should be, the camera feed should be transparent. I don't know if we have any modifications on the SDI signal, but I haven't seen any stations with issues on the color palette.
Sorry, Pablo. Normally in the ChyronHego machine, there is no
There is no.
There is no compression. Normally, there is no compression. It's the normal signal.
Yes, that's correct. The same signal that you're sending is the same signal that we ingest.
So it's weird like this.
In fact, we could try other versions of Prime if you feel like this is a camera feed issue that goes on Prime. My thoughts is that it could be an something that goes outside of Prime, because Prime is transparent to the signal.
Yeah.
Prime ingests the signal and outputs the signal without any kind of color palette modifications if you do not set up an LUT table. So here, if you set up an LUT, but you should be licensed for it. But the only thing that it changes are the color calibrations, and that's the default behavior on Prime. If you don't have LUT, it doesn't change any kind of color palette or color calibration.
كان كيفاش تموديفي لي كولور ديالو اسمه انا كانت
بصح هذا واش سقسيتو قال لك ما دير والو دخل السينيال دخل
دخلت لي بارامتر بقيت كيفاش تموديفي لي كولور ديالو
اي هذا واش كان هنا كي تحب بصح
لا ماشي في هذا ماشي في برايم صوت ما طلب.
Okay, so are we okay to proceed with the editor, or are there other questions referring to that? or would you like to see something in particular before proceeding with the editor side?
I have another question
Yes.
about the script on Java
Yes.
or another.
So go ahead.
Which
Go ahead.
exactly we can add a script like this? What's the
We
requirement for that?
the scripts guide. We have a scripts guide that it's oh, this is important. Thank you for that question, because this will allow me to provide you a more comprehensive guide on scripting, as well as a more comprehensive guide on Prime altogether. I do not do scripts on Prime because I'm not part of the scripting team. The idea is that most of the Prime application use C# scripts for Prime, for inherit Prime behavior. But on the editor side, you could add JavaScript as a resource, a JavaScript here, and a C# script as a resource. So as an external, um, either class that you can create whenever you're calling a scene, or a JavaScript behavior which allows you to load JavaScript random JavaScript file to trigger different kinds either of modifications on the corresponding scene or logical checks. We're going to go through the logical and through the behavior on prime scenes. That's more towards 102, 103. But the idea is that the scripts are used mainly to define scene behavior and prime behavior altogether. We have other ways to define prime behavior, such as parameters, as well as we have our own logic embedded into prime, which is a more basic logic. It's not scripting, or it's not inherently coding, but you could use either the prime already embedded logic, or you could use scripts if you know how to use C# scripts. The idea is that you can also go inside of the prime documentation folder, which is the one that you have here. And this is one of the things that I forgot on the first training, because we were going through all of the troubleshoot procedure. The idea is that all the things that I was speaking with you that refers to prime, not to the overall environment, not to the troubleshoot environment, but what it refers to prime, the best case scenario would be for you to, if you don't want to reach out to Chiron, it would be to go through these specific guides that has a very example guided guides. So for example, if you want to script, I think we have a script here, script display data automation, scripting guide, API scripting guide. So if you want to go through all the properties, all the behaviors, all the use case scenario that you could do, you have your own C# API, which you can either create or build inside of Prime. The idea is that it takes care of all the hierarchy, it takes care of all of the properties that you need to create different classes for your scripts are already created on here, and you can set your own based on the syntax that we provide on the guide. If you want to know a little bit more about for example, about the Lydia module, you can see it on Prime Lydia. If you are more guided towards the designing, you would use the Prime user guide, which is more guided towards designing and has all the features that we are going to review throughout right now and throughout the rest of the training. There is also a couple of things like the scene events. This is one of the things that we are going to go through the guide, because this is a very specific set of properties that we need to review on the guide. I can memorize all the use case scenarios for scene events. There are a lot of them, but it also depends on how the scene loads, how the scene behaves on which triggers. So the idea is that if you have any kind of questions or if you have any kind of inquiries regarding something in specific. So for example, player configuration guide, if you want to see if player configuration can handle LUT files or changes in the color, or if the prime is transparent through the connection on the matrix, all of that information is based on the documentation folders that we have here. As well as the P commands if you want to go through automation, whichever we don't cover throughout the course, you can either ask us to provide you with another review, or you can guide them, or you can go through a specific, if you only have one specific question, you could go through either the specific routes that you have here. Okay?
Okay.
Then we can jump into the editor. As I was telling you on the first training, the editor differs from the playout because you are using a different instance of Prime, which allows you to have a more resourceful environment when you are not using the designer. And we suggest that you stay out of the designer while you are going through a playout phase. So we have our new scene here. We are on the training project. We could change the project whenever we need to, or whenever we are working on different projects. We can change the project on the fly. We can open a new project or create a new project if we need to. We have a bunch of options here on the top toolbar. We're going to go through a couple of them on the first days, or today and tomorrow, which is new scene and base scene, which are the ones that we are going to, and transition, which are the ones that we are going to manage for the most part on Prime. New scene and base scene. New scene is the way that you can create a new scene to use it as a playout, whereas base scene is the scene that you're going to use to generate your content, your base content, your immutable content, the heart of the graphical package. So for example, if you want to have a lower third, the behavior of the lower third might be the same for all the lower thirds variations, but the modification you're going to add is you're going to modify maybe if you want a 2-line or a 1-line, or if you want to have a flag on top, or if you want to have a courtesy, you would do a new scene and use the base as the placeholder for all the changes. We're going to go through base scenes. Those are a little bit more into the advanced side, but those usually most of the stations are using base scenes today, and it's one of the more reliable ways of generating a lot of content in a little time. Then we have the transitions, which is how the Prime will behave whenever you send over new information on top. So if you send over a lower third with the name of your presenter, for example, and you want to change the camera and send another name on top, depending on how you create your transition, it will be either a cut, or you can set a fade, you can set a crossfade, you can set a flare, you could send wherever you would prefer. What it will do is it will trigger that behavior from that specific transition on the change on the same scene, because since we were working on scenes here, if we want to load, for example, a lower third, let me see, multi-style. So for example, top line text, lower line text. If we, instead of that, we put Pablo, and we play it out, what it will do is it will do a crossfade with a movement effect. That's a transition effect. If you change to another scene that has the same base, it should do the same swap, but in this case, since it doesn't have the transition effect, because these are different scenes altogether, it doesn't have the same base, what it will do is it will trigger, it will close the scene altogether, and it will kick off the scene to put the new one in. If you were able to have a base, what it will do is it will have a different behavior altogether. That's why it's also important to have the same base for mostly your whole graphical package, because the idea is that you would have a a package that it will go hand in hand with the different types of graphics that you create. That's why most of the stations use base scenes with very minimal base, or with depending on the type of graphic that you want to design. But the idea is that you will create your package accordingly to the behavior that you want to have on each scene. So after that, we could go through Edge. Edge are mainly for the Prime Live environment. I told you before, this is a web API that you could submit your scenes from Prime into the Prime Live environment. Master control, if you want to have a control panel that takes care of a general behavior on your environment, they should be able to load specific scenes. It turns your Prime into a more of a button switcher, which you can recall specific things with those buttons, and a very static environment, because you have those options, and those are the options that you're going to use to load or modify parameters. It's very useful when you have people that are not a lot knowledgeable on the operator side, or that you need to have a more simpler environment. Clip transitions, if you had a clip license, you could use clip transitions and apply clips to the transitions. Like, for example, wipes or anything that has to do with MOV files. You could add, instead of transition effects, clip transition effects. Switcher transitions, if you have, we used to have a prime switcher, which is called Mantis, if I'm not mistaken. No, prime switcher it was called. I don't know if currently we are developing anything for the prime switcher, but the idea is that the switcher transition, it would allow you to have that behavior, that a specific behavior to load into that specific switcher. Lastly, we have, well, application logic, if you want to run or edit any kind of application. So if you go into new application logic, it will open up a scripting application tab, and you can create your own application on here that takes care of either receiving information, modifying GPI, adding JavaScript, adding messages. This is a very advanced part that it should be taken care of with, I would assume, with either a scripting specialist from our side, because I'm not savvy enough to provide you information about scripting. If you are interested in that, though, I can reach to Agustin to have somebody reach you back regarding the scripting environment and how to set up, or how to have examples for your environment. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll reach Agustin, which is my manager, to figure out the best case for you to go through scripting. Then we have current project, master control. This is to new master control. For that, you will need to generate first a master control panel. Once you have that generated, you can start creating a master control environment. And the idea is that you will load it as a scene, or as you will load it with the Prime startup. If we go into generate master control panel, you would create your master control. It needs to load a little bit, but the idea is that it will load all the scenes that you have on your environment, and it will let you play or transfer the scene that you have, or that you create. So it will let you select that and play or transfer. This is a very situational object that you would use. And the idea is that you would be able to run it on Prime. So the idea is that you click crawl and play, and it sends the crawl already to the play output. We will see the events. We will see all of the rest of the panels here. I'm focusing right now on the file types, and on the structure on the top. Then we have, well, if we want to open a specific scene, or a specific object, or a specific master control or transition, we can go through open recent to open different projects that you have here. Save as, save image, save a cameo file, and cameo upload. All of these are saving type files. The only difference is, if you save it as a cameo file, it will not be saved as a PBX. It will be saved as a CRD, which is a cameo compatible file. And Cameo Upload is for you to connect directly to the Cameo. Since we don't have a Cameo, we're not going to go dig through it. FBS, SVG, AE, and edit messages. This is all importation. FBX and SVG are should be transparent to Prime, but After Effects, there is a guide towards how to import After Effects formats, because you need to add a plugin from our side on After Effects, and you need to have a specific set of parameters on your project on After Effects to be able to import it directly into Prime. I would suggest, if you're interested in it, I can provide you a guide towards After Effects importation tomorrow, because I need to review the material and I will need to go through the guide itself to provide you a more comprehensive guide, as well as provide you with the how is it called, with the examples with an examples project. Then we have close or close all. You might think close all. Why? Because every window that you add gets open on here. So master control, everything that you add, even if there are scripts or application or new scenes, all of them are loaded on the background. That's why when you say close all, it will close all the windows that you have and it will empty all the information. It will give you a new scene. So it's kind of, you can work everything, but remember to close whenever you finish to work on that specific scene. Or if you want to keep on working and start working on other scenes later, you can do that by just modifying the window that you have here. Then we have edit, which is very simple, undo and redo and clear canvas. View, this is a more, this is the same that you have on the playout side, with all the panels that are movable, with all the docking panels that you have here. You can move around and dock wherever you need it. Or if you want to have them on a full screen like this, you can set it up as well. That's why the Atlas is so convenient, because you can drag it over to another monitor as an application window. You can drag it over to another monitor to review it. And on here we have the, well, we have a lot of things to do. We have bindings, we have most of the objects that you use, or most of the things that you use, as long as you are using them, or as long as you are adding them accordingly to your environment, they will appear. So for example, if you want to add, for example, a logic, or if you want to add, let me see what can trigger the parameters expressions, that would be more, oh yeah. If you want to add any kind of logic or conditioners, you can click on conditions. That will open the logic panel. So boom, there you have your logic. If you want to add any kind of parameters, you can click on parameters. That will add the parameters panel. If you want the expressions, and replaceables, it would add the replaceable side. So if you're going to use it, if you're going to use that part, the idea is that it will pop up on their own. So it's not as you will start working with the things that you are prefer to work. So for example, if you don't have a keyboard bank from one of the classic for the classic Cameo keyboards, you will not really need the keyboard bank to be connected all the way or at all. That reminds me that we need to go through devices. We have a lot to cover, guys. We have a lot to cover. Then we have preferred layouts. We can either reset the layout if you want, or we can have our preferred layout and we can save that layout if you're going to design specifics. Tools goes for rulers, snappers, wireframes, normal keys, which are already available on the corresponding canvas. So we have scale, we have rotate, which are the modifiers for the objects. Then we have the rulers, wireframe, normals, if you have the key, or if you want to show key. For example, if you want to review that key on the output. Then we have manipulators, as well as ROI, origin of interest, if you want to modify that based on the object that we create. So the same things that you see here are already placed on the Prime, on the canvas itself. The only thing that we need is just to know where they are located, or if we are going to use it to where are they going to be. And lastly, we have the help manual. We have the help tab, which is very helpful because you can open the documents folder and the user guide as well. But we have the config file, which allows you to have your own keyboard shortcuts, your own settings, and licensing. This is very important, guys, because if by any chance you are designing something for, I don't know if you have two equally comparable CG models, or if you have one which is CG tier 3 and CG tier 2, or an advanced and a premium, or maybe you're designing something for a branding and you don't have a branding, but you need to design something for a branding box in another station. Maybe you want to have something designed for video walls. All of these uh, licenses usually are set to the license that you have on your dongle. So all of the objects that you can use are based on your current dongle or the dongle that you have on inside of your box. But if you were going to go, for example, for tier 4 CG, or let's clear everything. So let's go for branding tier 4. So that would be what you would be using for branding. So you can design based on the object that you are working on. So I'm not going to set it to current license, but just to let you know, if you're ever going to define or design, or if you're designing for a specific environment, you should take into consideration what the limitations of that box. And for that, we have these scene parameters or scene designer licensing. Well, keyboard shortcuts is if you want to add or modify any kind of keyboard shortcuts. This is more guided towards as long as you are more comfortable working with the environment, you would add more keyboard shortcuts to it. Depends on the kind of object you want to add and the behavior that you want to use it for. And lastly, the settings are more for a general review. The scene, we could start creating new scenes based on other scenes. Auto-save layout if you are going to save the layout as it is. The ROI, we can define the ROI depending on what we want to create, of what kind of object we want to create. We can bound the objects to the ROI as well. The thumbnail, I'm going to show you the thumbnail in a minute, but it's the preview, the preview that you get from the play outside. The preview that you get, let me close these settings. Cancel, come on. So if you go here, the thumbnail is the one that you see here. These shouldn't change on height. These should change on height, but not on width. Oh, that's right. That's why I just remember one thing that one client asked me a long time ago. That was referred to the height of the thumbnail, because you could have a very, very big 8,000 by 4,000 or 8,000 by 2,000 assets or scenes, and they were asking if we could have more a higher thumbnail. I was like, I don't think we can, but here's the proof that you can. So I just seen it on here. That's a good thing. So if you want to show on the canvas, these are all the modifications, the modifiers that you can add or modify on the canvas. If you want to show grid, or if you want to show the save tiles, depending on how you're designing your objects. Usually I turn off the grid because there's also the tool to snap to grid. So it's useful, but it's a little bit annoying when I'm connected through TeamViewer, because I have a little bit of a delay. So I got snapped everywhere. But if you want to use it, you can enable it. The control panel, the default control panel, we're going to go through a control panel in a moment, but the idea is that you would have a default control panel behavior. The scene tree, if we want to filter information or highlight whenever we are searching objects or we are searching things through the scene tree. Actions, these, we need to go through actions to review this, but this mostly the behavior that the action have whenever we go through the cursor, whenever we go through backgrounds or keyframes, specific keyframes. A project, this is important to have this checked, because do you remember the common folder? which usually what it did was use the common folder as a placeholder for every graphic that you had. And when you zip it, it add that zip into that environment. And then when you unzip it, it had that common folder with that graphic added into the common folder. Well, what we have here is in reality the use case scenario when you are not running through the common folder. So you add something on the, for example, you got something from your downloads folder and you want to add it into the prime. So you drag and drop it, or you add it as an image, for example. As soon as you finish the working with the project, what you would do is you will save the scene, and it will ask you, hey, you have this outside of prime. Is it okay? Or would you like to import that as well? It's a very neat function, and it's very useful when you are trying to have or aggregate things outside of the project. Text, to define a default text font or text file, we're going to go to the text default style. But the idea is that you can select a preference on the text type. If you have a specific characters, if you have specific typography or fonts, you could define them and load them as soon as you load any kind of text object on the screen. So with that concluded, we can jump into the toolbox scenes and transitions, as well as for the scene trees, properties, and events. We're going to go through that process because I don't want to jump into the timeline and replaceables right now, because timeline is a little bit more easier when you have clear behavior on the objects. So we have our graphics here and our toolbox, not our graphics. Our toolbox that differs on 3 different spaces. We have the graphics, we have the effects, and we have the resources. Graphics usually are objects that you add, okay? That are objects that you add on the environment that are capable of having specific properties that they share between each other. Effects are the modifiers that you apply to the graphics or to the objects or to the, to the graphics, because the groups is also a graphics object. So, and then you have the resources, which are external sources of information that you would add. For example, in the case that you were using the audio, you could add an audio, and you can select either an audio file, text file, UI text, or a video input. That's where you were asking, hey, could I use an audio file from another source? Here's where you would use a video input audio file. So, and you would see that the scene group now has this audio one connector, because now it's being fed through a resource. Resources are specific. They behave in a very different way between all of them. So the idea is that resources are going to be focused on the behavior that the user wants. These are very specific. So if you want to add audio, if you want to add a data bind, if you want to add those, all of these have their own events and properties and their own set of modifiables, which are outside of events and properties. But for graphics and for effects, the properties and events share some similarities. On some occasions, the conjunction or the aggregation of multiple effects are different effects. So for example, we have the crawl, which is an effect that applies a crawl effect into a text. But then we have the roll, which applies a roll effect, which is from the top to bottom, from bottom to top or top to bottom, depending on the behavior that you want to add. And then we have roll crawl, which is the combination of crawl and roll. I think it's neat. I think it's a good thing that we have a combination of different effects. It saves you a lot of time to apply a crawl and roll effect and define to which kind of object you want to apply to. But at the same time, it's a kind of like, you understand that the prime as a conjunction of other parts, and it's a little bit simpler to work with. So suppose that we add a text into our first object. Oh, I have the grid disabled. So good. I have the grid disabled with the snapper. It's annoying as well to see. I'm accustomed to work without grid. So we can have the text saying, We can add a text here, and as soon as we add a text or any kind of graphic, what we will do is we will see, first of all, we will see the object that is going to be selected, and then we're going to see our properties that changes from the previous property, which was the nothingness at all, because in here what we are modifying is the scene group instead of text. If we click anywhere that is not the text, we will get the scene group. This is important because all of our objects are going to be allocated inside of the scene group. The resources are outside of our scene group, and all these scripts and all the data, GPI, well, our resources are going to be, since they are outside of the scene group, they can be placed or they can be used for other behaviors that are not, maybe that you don't want them to be loaded directly into a scene group. Maybe you don't want behaviors to interfere with the scene itself. So what you could do is you could add a base scene that is nowhere to be found or outside of the scene group, and just to have it as a trigger or just to have it as a transition effect behavior. So the idea is that whenever we add an object, we need to have some kind of hierarchy. Our main object is the new scene, and our new scene has, even though we create an object out here, our new scene is responsible for all the other content that we can modify or add. But the scene object itself, you can modify behaviors on it. So you have the properties for that scene. First of all, you have the name for that scene that as soon as we save it, we are going to be presented with the save. We can call it, for example, training test 01. I think I wrote it wrong. Yeah, I wrote it wrong. So save as training test 01. And where is the training test? There you go. Training test 01. Okay. So now we have the training test here. We have a couple of things that you see here. So for example, our scene group, if you want to jump directly into that different types of separators or properties for each of the scene group or each of the panels. We have the version that this scene was created. This is important because if you come from a very old version, like I was referring to when we were using the demo content, for example, if we open up the demo content now, you would see if we select any kind of scenes, this is built on 4.2.1, but if we open one of the demo folders, like this one, this is created on 2.1, which is a very old Prime version. We are on 4.9.1. So again, let's go back to training test, and let's go into the training repository. Now we are on 4.9.1, and based on this, you should have either logic that applies to the 4.9.1 version if you're on 4X version. The idea is that you are mostly upwards compatible, but not backwards compatible. So you can load most of the scene and logic and behaviors from scenes that are from older primes, but you cannot load scenes that are from newer prime versions, or you're more prone to have issues on newer prime versions. Description, keyword, style, message ID, channel, layer, all of these are mostly metadata that you're going to use for Cameo. Since we are not on Cameo, that has no use for us, but it's important to know that if you want to search for something in particular on the search box here, it will ask for either the name or it will ask for any of these properties. If you have this, if we paste lower third here and we search for lower third, so LW3, we save that out. So save, we go down here and we search here for LW3. We have the training test. Even though it has a different name, everything is different. As soon as you modify any of these objects, any of these parameters or properties, the search toolbox will be used to search that specific one. So if you're going to design all the lower thirds and you want to have folders that contains all the lower thirds, you can just search lower thirds. There you go. This is more for a playout or for an operator-oriented environment. Keywords, styles, message ID. These also are part of the style defines a specific load type. If you want to load some colors, some different changes into the images, text. If you want to load, this is more guided towards logic. But the idea that this style can also be added as a resource. So you could have a style spreadsheet that contains different modifications to either text, images, clips, video inputs. Styles behave in a rather it's like the change of color scheme in all of the prime behaviors. It could also be based, if you're using a cameo, it could also be triggered based on the clock. So it has a logic embedded into it that depends on the time of the day. It could trigger a different kind of style, but that's a more complex package. I think CBS from US is using it like if it is 9 p.m., it has a deep blue color scheme. If it is morning, it uses a yellowish color scheme automatically from the renderer, but they have a camera environment and all the stuff. Keywords search only for search, and the keyword and description are only for search, easy to search on the playout search box. Message ID are also for them to be searched into the search box. The channel depends on, most likely, on the channel that you're going to create your graphic for. If you don't have a specific graphic that you want to create for example, if you said output 1, right now we only have one output. But the idea is that if you're running through multiple primes and you want to have all your lower thirds loaded into prime 1, channel 2, what you could do is, as soon as you have this pushed into the cameo, this is also cameo behavior, but you could also define it for the output inside of your own prime if you have multiple channels. The idea is that you select that scene, and that scene gets played out on channel 1, even though you selected channel 2, or if you load it on the quick search box, or on the recall box, say, hey, play me message 103, and 103 is using the channel, I don't know, maybe 3. So it will play it out automatically on channel 3. And the layer, because it's important to know that you are able to push from minus 1000 to plus 1000 layers. This is how you apply the layering. Important thing to know, if you're using layerings, the input signal comes as layer 0. So anything that goes on layer 0 will remove the signal. So for example, if now we go into layer 0 here, we save it out, we search for lower third, I think. Oh, I've removed that. Let's go all the way down, and we paste the training. Clear, training test. Okay, it's not kicking off the signal. That's weird. Maybe they fix it. It's possible that they fix it and now it's on a different layer. File, save, maybe it's on -1. And I think it is, because you're moving. No, I think they're using a different kind of layering now. I might need to reconsider the layering here. The other thing is that the base structure for any kind of base file usually uses a layer below the layer that it's being built on. So if you're going to use, for example, a base layer for the lower thirds, for example, the idea is that your lower third would be on layer 3 and your base would be on layer 2. And if you want to be completely sure that the base is not going to have any issues, what usually they do is they have the base from layer 1 to layer 10 for the base, and from layer 11 onwards to for the other layers that uses the base layers. Sorry for that. Effect in, effect out, layering, layer out, previewing, update behavior. All of these are behaviors that the scene will have, but these are not all of the behaviors that the scene will have. So effect in and effect out are the ones, the animation as you trigger whenever you load anything. So this is your effect in, as you can see. And if you remove it or clear, it will trigger the effect out, that in this case is just a drop down on the object. You need to declare that into the timeline. Layering and layer out depends on the layer that is being used on. If you have two different scenes on the same layer, that's how the behavior will trigger. If they don't find any kind of layer information and they are on the same layer, what it will do is it will trigger the effect out. But now we're going to events. Wait, I'm going to events. Let's wait for a sec. Let's wrap up the last part of here because it's important. I want to jump into the effects, but let's keep on here. Resolution depends on the type of, usually takes care of the first output that you have and uses that for the asset creation. But you could set up either a custom resolution, you could set up 4K. For design, you could set up mainly whatever you need for other boxes. But if you're designing on an environment which is 1080 50, what you would do is you would have the clips and everything on the same video format to use. Some of the normal use case troubleshoot scenarios is that, for example, somebody created a clip that you want to use, but the clip goes faster than what you think it needs to go. So the idea is that the issue here is that maybe the clip is on 25 frames. So you have your format on 50 and the clip that you played out is on 25. What it will do is it will play twice the speed of the clip. Same goes if the clip has, it doesn't go the same if the clip has more frames. What it will do is it will accommodate for the clip. But if it has less, it will take less time. If the clip is on P and you are running I, it might give you black flashes. Or if the format is not the right one, for example, you have 1080p and the clip is 720. If you have the clip to be scaled all the way, depends on the kind of clip or image that you're going to use. But if the clip has the property to scale, it will try to overscale it, adding more pixelation to it, but it will try to overscale it to feed the corresponding 1080 signal. Again, region of interest, graphic to bounds, depending on the region of interest. And thumbnail, this is where you select the what it's going to show you on the play outside. So we could add either, let me see. So let's see, let's grab this image that you have here. Let's go into Paint just to have a quick view on a thumbnail that we could create. So let's save it out as desktop thumbnail. So we can go into either the editor and update from Canvas, and if we add an image here, we can go back into the training test and update from Canvas, and what it do is it will grab a snapshot of what it has on the canvas at the moment. Or what we can do is we can define a file, desktop thumbnail. So we have that as our thumbnail, and now you have the training test here. It will not modify anything. It's just for the clearance of the operator and for the image. Lastly, we have the command sequence. These are very important things that most of the time gets overviewed, but the command sequence allows you to have allows you to have a sequence. It says command sequence, I know, but the idea is that it allows you to have different actions trigger one right behind the other. So it allows you to create, for example, bullet graphics. It allows you to create, for example, discover graphics. So for example, you have an OTS that you need information to show information, but you want to show first the graphic with a little bit of info, with only the photograph of a person. You could have that. The idea is that you need to trigger that sequence command, and you need to define for each action, you need to define that sequence command. It's a very simple way to define it, but it's important that you know that, because if you ever want to do any kind of bullet graphic or any kind of reveal graphic or any kind of trigger graphic with a full screen, it's a very neat thing to have, like a command sequence. And the command sequence can get triggered by a play command, by the next play command that you've received from any sources. So for example, if you have a command that sends through ISQ, that is the play command or command sequence, they have a specific command. Or you could have a play command or a spacebar from the playlist environment. Or if you are connecting through the Sony, what you can do is you can have a P command that will trigger the command sequence. So it's already baked into the prime. It's only a matter of defining it from the environment that you want to automate it. Then we have the events. So maybe you thought, well, effect in, effect out, it's kind of it's simpler. It's when it effects in and when it goes out, and when it gets loaded in and when it gets previewed in. Previewing and update behavior are also important, because previewing, you could also set it up for specific behaviors, such as, for example, load it from a database or an RSS feed. So when you send information over to the playout, it already connected to the corresponding database. But the events are more than just those 6 that we just saw. So we have the effect, preview in, preview load. We have the after load, before play, and for that we need to go into the guide. Not this one though, this one. User guide. There we go. So here is where all the effects, the scene events, gets triggered. This is important because it depends on how do you want to accommodate your scene and the best case scenario for everything. As well as you have a flow control on here. So the sequences or the play sequences, stop, close sequences, gets triggered on different events. So it's important to have those events, or to know a little bit of those events before and after you start creating a graphical package. On the best case scenario, on the more simpler graphical packages, you don't really need to know about all of them. These 6 objects are totally fine. So mostly the effect in and effect out and the preview in and update behavior. The layers are not going to be the crucial thing to know, but the effect in and effect out are defining, they define how the scene plays. So at least these 2 effects are needed for you to understand the prime behavior. The preview in, we could, if you're going for an RSS and if you're going for a database connection. An update behavior, it depends on what kind of behavior you want to add to the corresponding scene that you're loading, because this could define the same scene. If you're defining a base scene with update values or replace values, it will define the whole behavior that you would have on your structure. So I would recommend, if you can dig a little deep into the effects, into the preview and update behavior, if you are designing a package. So once we have all of this, we can jump into the scene group and see some of the things that scene groups, graphics, effects share. Before doing that, I would like to ask you if you need to go to the bathroom or if you need to go and take some water. I would assume that this would be a good time for that. Are we good for a 10-minute break?
No,
Normally we finish. Normally we finish for today.
Oh, we are finished for today. You're right. I'm half an hour extended. Oh, guys, sorry for that. We have a lot to cover. But yeah, I wanted to be a little bit throughout lead since we started a little bit later. And if you want, we can proceed with 10 minutes more, or if you need to continue on your daily tasks, please go ahead. Keep on your daily tasks, and we'll reconvene tomorrow.
Okay.
Are there any questions that you would like to ask? Marco, do you think that we are in a good spot right now? And just reconvene tomorrow?
Yeah, we continue tomorrow. For me, we are okay now because they have to put the signature and they finish their hour.
Got it.
Work.
Got it. Sorry if I overextended. I wanted to recap the 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 extended time that we lost yesterday, and also I wanted to go through a little bit since we were a little bit off the schedule when we started the recording. But time goes flying. There is also another thing that we used to give these these classes on a 3-hour environment. That's why I'm accustomed to do a break into the 2-hour period. But yeah, let's reconvene tomorrow, guys.
Of attention, normally 1 hour, half, 2 hour, not more.
I
Because-
totally agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's okay for today. For me, we can continue tomorrow.
Okay, okay.
It's good
So
for
far,
you?
so for me, it's perfect. For the rest of the guys,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay.
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 Tomorrow.
If you have any questions or anything, please let me know tomorrow, and we will start with the content generation for tomorrow. Strictly designing from here on out.
Okay.
There is also a class that we need to add. I know I already spoke with Marco. I know that you are occupied, guys, but as soon as we have that time frame, we will recover that class that we lost yesterday.
Okay, perfect.
As well as if you have any questions, let me know. And if you need to review something, or if you want to see, or if you are needing of more information in a topic that we already reviewed, let me know and we can review that again.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Pablo. See you
Okay,
tomorrow.
I will stop the recording at the moment and
Thank you.
stop the presenting.